lovely weekend with my father and son, and it's interesting, Dan mentioned that this is a small church, and I'm reminded that Jesus didn't really like large crowds. You know, it was just 11 people that he used to change the world. And so last week y'all had 6 extra people. This week more than that, so we got to get to work. And as you've heard, a lot of you know, I'm a heart surgeon. And heart surgeons aren't particularly known for their humility, right? I mean, besides, it'd be a little bit weird if you went and talked to the heart surgeon and he said, well, you know, Mr. Parker, I'm really not sure if I can do your operation. I'm not sure how it would go. You know, maybe I have a bad day that day. You might not make it. I mean, that's not a surgeon going to have very many patients. But there's a fine line between confidence and arrogance. And sometimes there's a fine line between humility or pride. Or at least, as soon as you think you might have a good dose of humility, now it just turned into pride. And I think it's a problem that all of us can have. So how many people here this morning would say, okay, Doc, I'm doing very well when it comes to humility? Okay, no hands are going up. That's fine, that's fine. What about, how many people would say, Doc, I have a terrible problem with pride? Yeah. Oh, nobody wants to admit to that, right? But I think this message is for those of us who would raise our hand, and even more for those of us who wouldn't raise our hand, because we all have a problem with pride. It's just built into the human condition. And it's been on my mind a lot lately. I think this message is more for me than for you maybe, because this is something God has been dealing with for me in my life over the past several weeks. And just to tell you, I'm a person who's very positive. Through my life, God's blessed me, and just the way that I see the world and how I know we serve a good God, I just have a positive outlook in life. But over the past few weeks, maybe months, I noticed my mood was just going down. Sometimes I would feel depressed, and for no good reason. And that's how I know it's a problem. If you're up against a tough circumstance, your mood will be depressed. But I've got everything to be happy about, and here I am feeling miserable, and I'm going, where is this coming from? And hopefully over the next few minutes, I can explain a little bit more of that. I was kidding with my son. This was I had timed it. This takes an hour and 40 minutes. I hope that was okay, right? You said I think as long as I needed to. All right, I'm just kidding. Some of y'all, somebody passed out back there. All right, but when it comes to pride, how bad is this problem? I think it's something that we like to act like not a problem for us, right? But I was listening to a sermon by Adrian Rogers. You know him, Adrian Rogers, one of the best Baptist preachers, at least of the past 100 years. And he says that pride is the most destructive force in the universe. And I heard that at first. I was like, well, what about the nuclear weapons, you know? I mean, those wouldn't have been built, and they certainly wouldn't go off if it weren't for pride. And every war, every divorce, every argument really has a bad dose of pride in there somewhere. Amen. And if we could just get past the pride and deal with our problems, we would be a lot better off. Amen. So pride is one of those things easy to spot in other people, almost impossible to spot in yourself, at least oftentimes. And I hope as we look at all of this that we realize sometimes pride isn't exactly what we think it is even. So our text is 2 Kings 5. If you'll turn there, you Bible scholars know this is the account of Naaman the Syrian. I'll read most of the text for us. 2 Kings 5. The Bible says, Naaman, captain of the army of the king of Aram, was a great man with his master, highly respected, because by him the Lord had given victory to Aram. The man was a valiant warrior, but he was a leper. Now the Arameans had gone out in bands and taken captive a little girl from the land of Israel. She waited on Naaman's wife. She said to her mistress, I wish that my master were with the prophet who's in Samaria. He would cure him of his leprosy. Naaman went in and told his master, saying, Thus and thus spoke the girl who is from the land of Israel. And the king of Aram said, Go now, I'll send a letter to the king of Israel. He departed, took with him 10 talents of silver, 6,000 shekels of gold, and 10 changes of clothes. he brought the letter to the king of Israel, saying, "And now, as this letter comes to you, behold, I have sent Naaman, my servant, to you, that you may cure him of his leprosy." Well, this went to the wrong person, right? Went to the king, not the prophet. When the king of Israel read the letter, he tore his clothes and said, "Am I God, to kill and make alive, that this man is sending word to me to cure a man of his leprosy? Consider now, see how he is seeking a quarrel against me." It happened when Elisha, the man of God, heard that the king of Israel had torn his clothes, he sent word to the king, saying, Why have you torn your clothes? Let him come to me, and he shall know that there is a prophet in Israel. So Naaman came with his horses and chariots, stood at the doorway of the house of Elisha. Elisha sent a messenger to him, saying, "Go and wash in the Jordan 7 times, and your flesh will be restored to you, and you will be clean." But Naaman was furious. He went away and said, "Behold, I thought he'd come out to me, stand, call on the name of the Lord his God, and wave his hand over the place and cure the leper. Are not Abana and Pharpar, the rivers of Damascus, better than all the waters of Israel? Couldn't I wash in them and be clean?" So he turned and went away in a rage. Then his servants came near and spoke to him and said, "My father, had the prophet told you to do something great, would you not have done it? How much more then when he says, 'Wash and be clean'?" So he went down and dipped himself 7 times in the Jordan, according to the word of the man of God, and his flesh was restored like the flesh of a little child, and he was clean. When he returned to the man of God with all his company, came and stood before him, he said, "Behold, now I know there's no God in all the earth but in Israel, so please take a present from your servant now." But he said, Elisha said, "As the Lord lives, before whom I stand, I will take nothing." He urged him to take it, but he refused. Naaman said, "If not, please let your servant at least be given 2 mules' load of earth, for your servant will no longer offer burnt offering, nor will he sacrifice to other gods, but to the Lord. In this matter, may the Lord pardon your servant. When my master goes down to the house of Rimmon to worship there, and he leans on my hand, and I bow myself in the house of Rimmon, when I bow myself in the house, the Lord pardon your servant in this matter." He said to him, "Go in peace." What an interesting story, right? We've got an enemy of God who comes and is healed by God once he takes a step of obedience and faith. We see God's grace, we see faith, many different things in this story, and it gives us some insight also into pride and humility. We see from the beginning that Naaman was a great man. He was well connected. Basically, his friend was the king. He was wealthy, but he had leprosy. He had a disease that he couldn't fix. He had a problem that he couldn't fix. To some extent, it invalidated all of the rest of what he had going on. It's a symbol for sin, really. But for him, it was a physical disease. And the slave girl from Israel demonstrated faith. She said, "Oh, well, if you just knew the prophet in Samaria, he would heal you." If you look at the subtlety of that language, it's not he might heal you, he could heal you, he will heal you. Amen. That's its own sermon there, but we'll go on past that. So there's kind of this mix-up. They go to the king instead of the prophet. The king doesn't know what to think of it. But Elisha ultimately gets involved, and we see that Naaman brought all of this wealth with him, right? All this silver, gold, changes of clothes. Dr. Dilday, who's an Old Testament scholar, he estimates that's worth about $1 million in our day and time. Wow. Right? So this guy brings chariots and horses, this huge entourage where he has servants, and $1 million with him, and shows up at Elisha's house. That's in verse 9. So look at that again. Naaman came with his horses and his chariots and stood at the doorway of the house of Elisha. Elisha sent a messenger to him, saying, "Go and wash in the Jordan 7 times, and your flesh will be restored to you, and you will be clean." So this very important man with this huge entourage, all this wealth, shows up at Elisha's house, and Elisha doesn't even bother to say hello. He doesn't even go out there. He sends a servant out to give him this message: go wash in the Jordan 7 times and you'll be cleansed. So how does Naaman react to that? He's fine with it, right? I mean, how would you feel if you had some disease, let's say a cancer, that nobody knew how to fix? So you take your life savings, put it in a briefcase, you go up to Canada where there's a doctor who knows how to take care of it, show up there and the doctor won't even talk to you. That's not going to go very well with you, I don't think, if you're like me and if you're like Naaman. Right? We see his reaction in verse 7. He was furious. I think most of us would be. It says, Naaman was furious and went away and said, behold, I thought he would surely come out to me. That's his expectation. You're at least going to meet the guy. He would surely come out to me and stand and call on the name of the Lord his God, wave his hand over the place, and cure the leper. It's interesting. He wasn't furious because the message was there's no possibility you can be healed. That's something to be upset about. He was furious because his ego had been offended. It's because his pride had been thwarted. He was just upset by how he was being treated, that Elisha didn't come out to him. So that's a point from this story, is pride makes you think you're more important than you are. Naaman thought, in a roundabout way, doesn't he know who I am? All of this stuff, all my connections, I'm second in command. Nobody treats me like this. He can't treat me like this. Naaman expected to be treated like a great man, but Elisha treated him like a leper. He was a leper. I think all of us are prone to this. You say, oh, not me. Really? What about somebody cuts you off in traffic? He can't do that. What about somebody breaks in front of you in line at the grocery store? Oh, God bless you. Oh, no, that's not the way it works, right? You can't do that. All right, what about somebody sits in your pew at your church?
Uh-oh.
Pew's been in our family for generations. You can't sit on my pew. All right, what about somebody's taking over your Sunday school class? We all can be prone to feeling like somebody's treating us in a way that we don't deserve. But that feeling is pride. When the sense of self-importance is violated, it makes you angry. And I think of this example, I hesitate to tell you, but I'm trying to be authentic with this. I'm embarrassed of the story, but about 3 weeks ago, I had this misadventure, let's say, with the operating room. So I got called about midnight by a patient about a problem that was going to change my schedule for the next day. And so I got up out of bed because I didn't want to disturb my wife, and I called the operating room front desk and I said, hey, here's the situation, because it was going to change how the day would play out, and specifically first thing in the morning. I said, be aware, this is what's happening. You know, we need to do such and such so we won't have problems in the morning. And they're like, okay, no problem. Well, I couldn't get back to sleep very well, you know, because I had gotten up, whatever. I mean, it took me a while, maybe an hour to fall back asleep. So when the alarm clock goes off, I'm really tired. But I knew, okay, hey, I got to go in, right? So I go in, show up, I go to the pre-op area, and the patient's not even there. And that's when I got angry, okay? How dare they do that to me? And not only that, because I had gone out of my way to prevent this problem. Made me very upset, okay? And I don't think I thought in my mind the sentence, I am very important, how dare they do this to me? But that was the underlying idea. Does that make sense? And the whole morning after that, I was just sulking. I didn't yell at anybody. I didn't even really say much to anybody, but I was personally dwelling on that. Why can't they, then it stretches into why can't they ever get ready? Why don't they care about the schedule like I do? And it just depressed my mood, and I'm just sort of miserable. But I see in retrospect, I was making myself miserable. This wasn't some gigantic, colossal, couldn't be fixed kind of problem. They just weren't ready when I thought they should be. But it was really my pride that was the issue. Does that make sense? Yeah. And I think also in retrospect, what I see now is I always thought of pride as saying to yourself, I'm great, I'm great, I'm great. And I think we all can be prone to that at times. But the problem in particular for me was the form of pride that says, me, me, me. How does this affect me? I mean, I'm embarrassed to admit it, but I didn't even care how it affected the patient. I mean, they're delayed too. They're expecting to start on time. It was all about me, right? Romans 12:3 says, "For by the grace given to me, I say to everyone among you, not to think of himself more highly than he ought to think, but to think with sober judgment, each according to the measure of faith God has assigned." So, the message is, you are special. You are made in the image of God, fearfully and wonderfully made, but so is everybody else. And no one should think of himself more highly, notice that phrase though, than he ought. The Bible doesn't say you should think lowly of yourself. It doesn't say even that you can't think highly of yourself. You just can't think more highly of yourself than you ought. Right. So humility's not going around thinking, I'm no good, I'm nothing, I'm not special. No. You are special. You are a child of the King, noticed by the Creator of the universe. He wants to have a relationship with you. He cares for you. So don't ever go around thinking lowly of yourself. Humility's not thinking low of yourself. It's just not thinking of yourself. It's thinking about God, thinking about others, and then that's it. Not thinking about yourself all the time. Naaman, obviously, was thinking of himself. Notice verse 11 again. Naaman was furious, went away, and said, "Behold, I thought he'll come out to me, stand, call in the name of his God, wave his hand over the place, and cure the leper." Naaman thought he knew what was going to happen, is the point. He thought he knew what should happen. He thought to himself, he's going to come out here, call on God, wave his hand, and heal me. That's not what happened. And that's the second thing to notice. Pride makes you think you know more than you do. Naaman thought he knew best. Follow it up in verse 12. He is thinking to himself, "Are not Abana and Pharpar, the rivers of Damascus, better than all the waters of Israel? Couldn't I wash in them and be clean?" It's basically saying he thought he knew what the plan would be. He thought he knew better than Elisha. That's what really, truly caught my attention in this story and studying it, because that's where I've been lately. Okay? It's not, I'm great, I'm great, I'm great. It's, I'm right, I'm right, I'm right. And if I can describe this process for you, it's I have to hope it started off innocent enough. Okay? What I mean is, when I'm in the operating room, there's nobody else overseeing this. I'm the top guy there. If I can't do it, it doesn't get done. Okay? The point is, I've got to put every stitch exactly where it needs to go, or else the patient would have bleeding or some other problem. So I've gotten quite good at knowing, okay, if I see this, I need to put a certain stitch. And deciding it doesn't need to be what we call a figure of 8, or a horizontal mattress, or a 4-0 stitch, a 5-0 stitch, pledge it, no pledge it, all these kind of decisions almost in an instant. Because of the experience I have, I kind of know what should work. I try it, and then if it does work, that's data for my brain to say, okay, next time I'll do the same thing. If it doesn't work, then I'll try something else. And it's this iterative process to try to hone in on the perfect operation, if there is such a thing. No errors, nothing, left undone. Every stitch exactly where it needs to be. For me, this is something of an obsession. Okay? This is the kind of thing I think about a lot. Well, that was working well. So I started applying this technique to other parts of life. And it's a desire to be accurate. That's what it was for me. Okay? This obsession with accuracy. So an example. My wife says, "I'm going to run up to the grocery store, be back in 10 minutes. And I say, well, no, it takes 10 minutes to get there. It'll take you probably 15 to 20 minutes to shop. 10 minutes back, you're looking at 40 minutes. Well, you see how that doesn't go over too well? And yet, that's the way my brain started to be wired. I mean, I'm telling you, anytime I hear anything, it might be a sermon, it might be whatever, I'm like, well, it would be better if you did X, Y, Z. But honestly, I did not see that as pride. I thought I was just trying to be accurate. I thought it was an objective look at the world, and I'm trying to hone in on the accurate, factual basis of what's happening. But I see now that you can be factually correct and be completely wrong. At least in how you treat your fellow man. And if it's driven by pride, then no matter what you do, it's going to be wrong in the end in God's sight. And that's where I was. I can see, to some extent, if I apply that to my own life, that's probably okay. I think where I went awry was starting to apply it to other people. You shouldn't do that. You shouldn't do this. Am I in the place of God to decide such a thing? It's a very proud place to be. And I accidentally got there. But it doesn't matter how I got there. That was the pride that was welling up in my heart. That's what happened to Naaman here, I think. He thought, Elisha should have come out to me, called on God, waved his hand. I would have been clean. Besides that, this plan is stupid. I know there are 2 rivers in Damascus better than the Jordan. I'll go do that. This is a stupid plan. Do you find yourself doing that sometimes? Usually it's not face-to-face, at least most of the people I know, from me myself. But it might be something like, those idiots in Washington, D.C. They don't know what they're doing.
Amen.
But that's pride. That's a proud position to be in, to decide what's right and wrong for that person. You don't know the full details of their circumstance, and you're presuming a lot. All right, what about you say something like, the morons at the DMV, why does it take them all day to fill out one form? I don't know, but that's a proud point of view, okay? We've got to be careful with that. You see somebody zip by you on the road. What a bozo, why is he going so fast? Who knows, maybe they're about to deliver in the car or something. They're trying to get to the hospital. I mean, you don't know what's going on with that person. So who am I to decide what's right and wrong for them? I'm trying to get myself right, and God can worry about them. Okay? You know, the irony is that the more I tried to be accurate, and I'm not acting like I figured all this out. I'm just trying to explain to you how the Lord's brought me in just a few weeks, certainly studying this, and otherwise, where I can at least see that what I was doing was driven by pride. But the more that I tried to control things and decide what's right and wrong, the more miserable I became. Because a lot of things happen that aren't perfectly in line with what I want to have happen. And the more I dwell on, oh, they're not doing what they should, oh, they don't care about me, that's when my mood just started to get more and more depressed. Now, I would, of course, not ever say that all forms of depression are due to sin or anything like that, but I think some forms are, because I experienced that for myself. And once I repented and said, Lord, I don't want to be like this, and I started to see my pride for what it was, my mood naturally came back up to where it usually was. I could have some of that joy of the Lord again. So, a good example of where this can take you, once again, I'm embarrassed to mention it, but when that all went down, you got to keep in mind, for 7 years, I was never late to a first in the morning operation. It's just because, you know, my dad's that way. If you're going to be there at a certain time, you just get there early. That way you won't be late. And I just got up so early that I was never late. Why do I mention that? Because the operating room is often late. And that frustrates me as somebody who's so concerned with getting there on time. Does that make sense? There's a disconnect there. I feel like they're not trying hard enough. Okay? Well, when all of this went down and they were late and I had gotten up and couldn't sleep and all this stuff, in my mind, I decided the next day I'd show up late on purpose. I'd never done that before. Don't judge me. But that was my secret plan. It's a form of protest, right? Like if I can't get them to cooperate, then I'll show them late, you know? And I thought I'll show up an hour late. Okay? And so this is my secret plan. Well, that night, at about 9 o'clock, one of the nurses sent me a text message, which he does sometimes, and he said, hey, tomorrow you need anything special for your case, heart case. I said, no, nothing special. You know, that was it. And he wrote back and he said, okay, sounds good. We'll be ready. That was it. That was it. I don't think he knew I had a secret plan to be there late. How would he? I didn't tell anybody. But I think of it almost like that servant girl, and almost like Naaman's servants. It was just a nudge back to where I needed to be. Somehow God used that text message to wake me up and say, what are you doing? Why are you going to show up late on purpose? And I immediately thought of that verse in 1 Peter where it says, do not repay evil for evil. And I was telling John Mark about this a little bit later. He's like, is it evil to show up late? And I said, for me that day, it would have been evil. Because I was intending it for evil. Right? So God help me not to be like that. I don't want to be like that. To return evil for evil. We want to return good for evil. That's what Jesus has taught us. But that was the intent of my heart, was to protest something by inconveniencing someone else. This is not treating my neighbor as I would want to be treated. And the Lord kind of opened my eyes to that and how it was driven all by pride. So I know Naaman and I could have been friends. He thought he knew better. I thought I knew better. And it says he turned and went away in anger. So the beginning of that section says he was furious, and it repeats the idea that he went away in anger. Thank God for godly advisors, kind of like my nurse friend. They steered him back, you know, and they said, hey, if he had said something really difficult, you were ready to do it. This is something easy, go and wash. What's to keep you from that? And he had a change of heart, right? Look at verse 14. It says, so he went down. And I've latched on to that phrase, he went down. I think it was a physical thing. The Jordan River is low elevation. I think from where they were to the Jordan, he went down. But I think it's symbolic of how we have to be in spirit and in attitude. We have to go down. We have to humble ourselves. You can't go up on your own and try to be near to God.
Amen.
It doesn't work that way. You've got to go down. And if you're seeking healing in particular, you've got to go down. There's no way to raise yourself up and receive healing. I think of the teaching in Luke 18. Jesus said 2 men went up into the temple to pray. One a Pharisee, the other a tax collector. The Pharisee stood, was praying to himself, God, I thank you that I'm not like other people, swindlers, unjust adulterers, or even like this tax collector. I fast twice a week. I pay tithes of all that I get. But the tax collector wouldn't even come near, standing a distance off, unwilling to lift up his eyes to heaven, beat his breast, saying, God, be merciful to me, the sinner. Jesus said, I tell you, this man went home justified rather than the other, for everyone who exalts himself will be humbled, but he who humbles himself will be exalted. Some of the irony of that story is if you think something like, yeah, thank God I'm not like that Pharisee. There's the pride. God opposes the proud, 1 Peter says. It's not just that he doesn't help them. He opposes them. And I think that's part of why I got so bent out of shape. I was in opposition to God. That's not a good place to be. I can tell you there will be no pride in heaven. That's right. Isn't that intriguing? God himself is not proud. What the heck? If anybody should be proud, it should be the creator of the universe who has all power, all knowledge, all understanding. He's not proud. Jesus demonstrated more humility than anyone who's ever lived. Philippians 2. Jesus, being in very nature God, did not consider equality with God something to be grasped, but made himself nothing. Taking the form of a servant and being found in human likeness, and being found in appearance as a man, he humbled himself to the point of death, even death on a cross. He went down. Then he went down more. Then he went down more. He couldn't have possibly have gone lower. I mean, think about just his birth. The one who made the gold and silver and all the precious things came to an obscure town, was born in a barn, which was probably a cave, wrapped in rags, and put in a feeding trough, where the snot and saliva of the animals was. It was so remarkable. That was the sign the angels told the shepherds. You'll find a baby in rags and in a feeding trough, because nobody would do that. But that's how our Savior came. Humble. And in Luke 2, his parents sort of forgot about him, left him at the temple. That's where they found him. And right after that, in Luke 2:51, it says, he went down with them and came to Nazareth and was subject to them. You kidding me? God of the whole universe went down with his parents and was subject to them. He took the form of humility to obey his parents. What about later on? He was a friend of kings and princes and all the good people. Not so much. He was the friend of sinners, prostitutes, and tax collectors. Jesus said that they called him a glutton and a drunkard. And for all practical purposes, Jesus was homeless. Right? He said, the Son of Man has no place to rest his head. I wonder if Jesus Christ walked in here, if any of us would even want to sit near him. But that's not about him. That's about our pride. We have more pride than we think we do. Jesus was humble every moment of his life. He is humble. He continues to be humble. He opposes the proud. There will be no pride in heaven. So John Mark and I watched Indiana Jones and the Last Crusade as research for this message. Yeah. You've seen that movie, right? Searching the Holy Grail, they find the place, and they go in, and there's kind of this final test to get into the final place. And the clue is, only the penitent man will pass. And one of the bad guys goes up there, he's going slow, he doesn't know what to think, and head's cut off. He didn't make it. He wasn't penitent. And they force Indiana Jones up there, and he's kind of going over this, and at the last second he realizes that the penitent man is humble, and he kneels. And that saw blade misses him, and he's able to pass through. And I think the gate of heaven is like that. It may look grand and stately, and I imagine it is, but I don't think it's 6 feet tall. You've got to kneel to get into heaven. In fact, it says every knee will bow. Yep. It's a matter of, are you going to do it here on this earth? Then you can pass into heaven. If you wait too late, you will bow, but then you will be cast out. And humility, a humble faith, helps us to get into heaven by the grace of God. There will be no one who's going to strut into heaven. Naaman strutted up to Elijah's house with his horses and his chariots and all his money. But he went down to the Jordan. He had to. So this afternoon, I encourage you to read the rest of this chapter. I didn't read it now, but it talks about Gehazi, who is Elisha's servant. And he hatches a bad plan, and that is, well, for one thing, he says to himself Elisha was too easy on him. So he chases after Naaman, lies to him, gets some money from him, and goes and hides it in his house. And Elisha finds out, God told him, I guess, and basically curses Gehazi with the leprosy. But part of the reason I mention it, it's a subtle thing, but in verse 24, if you just want to look there, and then maybe think about it this afternoon, it says, when Gehazi came to the hill, he took the things from the servants and put them away in the house. It seems like an odd detail when he came to the hill. But in the context of what we're saying, Gehazi went up the hill. He didn't go down. And when he tried to elevate and exalt himself, that's when he was brought low. God is the one who can lift you up. Amen. So as we finish up, notice that Naaman thought he needed healing from leprosy. And he did. He received healing, but he received deliverance from his pride. That's an even greater form of healing. You can see when he goes back to thank Elisha, he refers to himself, Naaman refers to himself 5 different times as your servant. Your servant, your servant, your servant, your servant, your servant. He's taken on that humility. When he had to go down to the Jordan, somehow that affected him after that. His perspective had changed. He was healed from leprosy. He was delivered from his pride. But also he came to faith in God. He declared there's no other God in all the earth.
Amen.
That's amazing for a polytheist, which almost everybody was at the time. This revolutionized the way that he saw the world and the way that he saw God. He came to faith in God. God blessed him, graced him with healing and faith he wasn't even looking for that day. And I bet pretty much every one of us here is like Naaman. Maybe you don't know God. Maybe you're not sure what to make of this person, Jesus Christ. I've heard people say, even beyond that, things like, well, look at all the starving children in the world. If God would allow that, then I'm not going to believe in him. But that's pride. That's not a problem with God. It's his divine prerogative to decide to do whatever he sees fit.
That's right.
The issue is our pride. When a person says that, what they're really saying is, I know better than God. And that pride can keep that person from a relationship from God and from an eternity with him in heaven. Don't be so proud to think that you know better than God. I've heard people say, well, I don't see how Jesus dying on the cross could save me. On some level, neither do I. I take it by faith. It's up to God to do what he said he would do. He decided that the blood of Jesus Christ could cleanse me from all unrighteousness.
Amen.
I can't explain it. I don't think I have a better plan than that. That's the humility of my faith. I'm just going to trust. But don't think, oh, well, I think there should be more ways to God. I don't think Jesus should be the only way. It doesn't work that way.
That's right.
Jesus said, I am the way, the truth, and the life. And in humility, we have to come to him in faith. Maybe you need healing, like Naaman. Maybe there is a physical problem that you're dealing with for which you're seeking healing. Humbly pray to God. He has the power to heal you.
Amen.
I don't know how to explain why he seems to heal some people and seems to not heal others. Paul had a thorn in the flesh. I don't understand all of that. Sometimes I think he uses doctors like me to help heal people. I like to think of it that way. Not everything is a miracle like we think. Calling on God, waving of the hands. Sometimes it's something else. But if you're here, cry out to God. But maybe a lot of us, I know myself, like Naaman, we really have as our major problem pride. And if you have a disturbed spirit like I did, you just are not at peace, maybe that's what's going on in there. And for us who profess faith in Christ, that's the collateral damage. When the nurses see me acting like a jerk, how am I supposed to turn around and say Jesus loves you? My witness is tainted when I let pride rise in my heart. Lord, forgive me. Help me to have the humility of Christ. And that will be a witness to those around me. So to finish up, you can leave here dignified, or you can leave here justified, but you probably can't leave here both.
That's right.
Naaman wanted to be dignified, but when he went down to the Jordan, I don't think there was any way to do that was fully dignified. But when he came up, he was right with God. And that's the only way to be.
That's right.
Jesus Christ was not dignified, but he was right with God. And when we go down, wrap up in humility like Christ, we can crawl right into heaven and feel right at home.
Amen.
Will you stand? We can have a time of